Thank you so much. It was just a mile and a half from here, near DuPont Circle, that in May 1925, President Calvin Coolidge dedicated the first Jewish community center in the nation's capital. And at his speech, as he laid the foundation stone, he spoke of the great Irish historian of the 19th century, William Lecky, and he quoted him correctly as saying, "The foundation stones of American democracy are cemented with Hebraic mortar." And he also spoke about the fact that in 1650, the legal code of Connecticut was filled with references to govern according to the laws of God in the Bible, and how John Davenport in New Haven 5 years later laid out the code of New Haven and again insisted that judges rule according to the biblical laws of God. That's how it used to be. And it's no surprise that we have three foundational pillars of government, because they knew better than we do. The verse from Isaiah 33, verse 22, "For the Lord is our judge, the Lord is our lawgiver, the Lord is our king." The judiciary, the legislature, and the executive laid out there in blueprint form. They were completely comfortable with that and completely happy with that. And that is what laid things down. Our entire legal system is based on the legal treatises of John Locke. The first one has 1,349 biblical references as sources for the laws that he proposes for the right kind of society. The second treatise, the second volume, has somewhat fewer biblical references, so not surprisingly, in the majority of law schools around America, they only study the second volume, not the first. Nobody is comfortable with the biblical foundations of the United States of America. You know, one of the very underlying principles is something that we find in chapters 2 and 3 of Genesis. What is it? Well, I like to think of a thought experiment. Imagine you were a teacher in charge of 50 high school boys. Gilligan's Island run amok, you're cast ashore on a desert island, you're going to be there for the next 5 years. What are the things you're going to have to deal with? Well, primarily, the issues are what I think of as monetary issues. You may not have any currency, but you're going to have to figure out how everybody eats. Are you going to let people specialize? Are you going to switch people's jobs? Somebody's going to fish, others are going to look for wild animals, but somebody's going to build shelter, or you're going to let them. And what about people who slack off and don't work? Do they still eat or don't they eat? There are a lot of big money questions that have to be resolved by you, the teacher, if you are all going to be found alive when the Coast Guard rescues you 5 years down the road. But now let's make it a lot more interesting. You're not in charge of 50 high school boys. You're in charge of 25 high school boys and 25 girls. Now you don't only have monetary concerns. You don't only have to deal with issues of eating. You also have to deal with issues of sex. What are the rules going to be? Any rules at all? No rules? Who takes care of girls while they're giving birth to babies? The impregnator or everybody? Who's going to feed them? Who's in charge? What are the relationships? What happens? These are all decisions. And the first two chapters of Genesis, chapters 2 and 3 of Genesis, lay out that if you get sex and money right, everything else falls into place. If you get the sexual morality of your society correct, and you get the pragmatic monetary views of how human beings interact economically, then you're going to have a society. After that, everything else, the arts, culture, foreign matters, all of those things fall into place, provided you're held together by a coherent vision of how these two worrying areas are dealt with. And we've gone through decades in this country of huge confusion in both those two areas. Huge confusion. Homosexual marriage is one thing. Abortion and the right to life, all of those things all spring from how you approach sexuality. And monetary matters, I hardly need to describe what has been done to the economy over the last 8 or 10 years. It's unimaginable. But it would appear that our country has been granted a reprieve. It would appear that we were transformed on November the 8th, 2016, in a way that people far wiser than me, people with far more political acumen than me, people with more political experience than me, simply cannot explain what happened on that day. To me, it was proof that God is not yet done with the United States of America. I confess that I regularly and frequently review the YouTube videos of the mainstream media that night. I do, because it reminds me that it was miraculous. You see, things that are not miraculous can be explained away, but this one cannot be explained. And I'm just thrilled, because I do believe that America was granted a reprieve that we must seize. We have a president who legislates and rules on sexual matters affecting the country in a better way than we have seen for many a long year in the United States of America. Since when have we had a more pro-life president? It's extraordinary. It's nothing short of miraculous. Our president's friends from 5 years ago and 10 years ago and 20 years ago would never have predicted it. But that's what we've got. We've got Judge Gorsuch on the Supreme Court. That's what we've got. And we've got a president who has a pragmatic approach to money. And regulation has been cut back, and some of the offensive excesses of Dodd-Frank have been pulled back. And this is just the beginning, provided we can seize the reprieve that we've been granted. It's truly quite extraordinary. And for me, I believe that all of you here together, ladies and gentlemen, here at the Faith and Freedom Coalition, we who support the Faith and Freedom Coalition and believe that this coalition and its leadership is vital in helping us all develop the ability to seize this reprieve. And with God's help, Faith and Freedom Coalition will bring us to a point where we can transform our diffidence into determination, and we can transform our timidity into triumph. And thereby, this organization, I'm proud to be part of, will lead us towards the bright, sunlit meadows of tomorrow, where all of us will celebrate then in joy, just as we are this very day here together. Thank you.